Today we are in a new section of North Bay Road in Miami Beach, and right behind me you guys can see one of the waterways here, and I was hoping to catch the king tide because right now is king tide season here in Miami, and we're expected to have higher than normal tides going into this weekend, but right now it looks like it's still kind of like on the lower side of the tide, but I can pretty much guarantee you later on today this water is going to be rising up right over this little seawall over here. Now we all know that inflation is starting to have its impact on everything that we buy in our everyday lives. And the next thing that inflation is going to start impacting is holiday travel plans. And basically this is the time of year when people start looking into where am I going to go for the holidays? How much am I going to spend? Am I going to fly? Am I going to drive? Am I going to visit family? What's this all going to cost me? What am I going to do, right? Now that we're getting closer to Thanksgiving and then going on into the Christmas and New Year season. So one thing that people are looking at doing who are still going to travel, because you have a certain select people who are just not going to travel at all. Like for me, I hardly ever travel during the holidays. I used to go back to Illinois a lot. Whenever I first moved to Miami, I would go back every year for Christmas, but that got expensive and I was already not in great financial shape back then, so I stopped doing it because I needed to save the money. And now people are going to be looking at doing the same thing. You're either not going to go at all, or people who are going to do it, they do things like 26% of people right now are saying they're going to make a shorter trip, okay? 25%, they're going to be looking at cheaper places to go. 23% of people say they're going to be traveling shorter distances. Also, 23% of people say they're going to be looking at driving instead of flying, since airline tickets are through the roof. But also, gas prices are pretty high as well, depending on where you live. But a lot of times, especially if you're traveling with more than one person in the car, usually on the shorter side of the drive, driving is usually always the cheaper way to go. If there's 2-3 people in the car. And this is having such an impact that this survey says that 86% of households that make $50,000 a year or less are going to be modifying their travel plans, versus people who make $100,000 a year or more. Even 70% of those people say that the rising cost of everything is going to impact their travel plans this year. In August this year of 2022, airline prices were up 33% compared to the same time in August of 2021. So that is a significant increase, guys. And the funny thing to me is the airlines are some of the businesses that got the most money during all of the government free money and the printing and the handouts, yet we still have to pay top dollar to go on these airplanes. So it's just nuts what's going on with the airlines right now. I personally haven't flown anywhere since the pandemic started. Obviously for a while it was pretty dangerous to do that, and your risk of getting sick was pretty high, so that was a big deterrent for me to do it. But now that that's mostly gone, the biggest deterrent for me is the prices, guys. Like, even if I can afford to pay for the new prices on the airlines, to me it just doesn't seem worth it. I'm not a huge traveler to begin with. I don't love flying all over the place or sitting on the airplane for 20 hours to go to some exotic destination. That's not appealing to me to begin with. So just paying for regular flights now that used to cost, $150 a person, $170 a person, now looking at over $300-400 a person, just doesn't seem worth it to me. Let me know what you guys think. Let me know if you're going to be traveling this holiday season. It seems like every other week we are getting more and more stories of just how much the mortgage industry is being impacted right now during this recession, and with what's happening with interest rate hikes. And right now, the mortgage activity that we're seeing out there is literally at a 25-year low, guys. Now, when I think of that, like 25 years ago, I was 10 years old. Like, that's how bad the situation is when it comes to the amount of people looking to get a mortgage right now. And you have to understand that this is going to have a major impact on the housing market. It already is having an impact, but it's just getting started. That's what I think a lot of people don't realize. People think that, these interest rate rises are going to be extremely temporary and it's only going to happen for, a few more months, and then next year everything's going to go back to the way it was in 2020. No, it's not going to happen, guys. You're not going to see these 3% mortgage rates or 2.7% rates probably ever again. That's my guess. And if we do, then you know we're basically screwed, because if our country goes back to having basically 0% Fed funds rate and they start printing money again, it's over, guys. The value of the dollar is going to completely drop, and we could be looking at negative interest rates like places like Japan, where their currency is worth practically nothing. Because last week, mortgage applications fell an additional 14% from the previous week. So it seems like every week or every other week, we're seeing these announcements of, how far these mortgage applications just keep dropping, guys. And you're going to continue to see that as these interest rates keep on climbing. Now that a well-qualified borrower is looking at practically a 7% interest rate, you can guarantee that if you're not that well-qualified, you're going to be much closer to 8 or even over 8. So if anybody out there has applied for a mortgage recently and you did get an 8% or higher quote, let us know in the comments, because I haven't actually seen that yet on my side, but I want to know if any of you out there are experiencing this right now. And they're saying that this 14% dip that we're seeing in applications is literally the lowest level that it's been since 1997, guys. 1997. I was 10 years old, okay? 25 years ago. They're also saying that Hurricane Ian actually had an impact on mortgage applications as well. Just here in Florida, after the storm, applications in Florida fell 31% for a new mortgage. So like we talked about in a previous video on what's going to happen to home prices here in Florida, you're going to see in the near term right now, you're going to see a slowdown. You're going to see prices go down in these areas that got hit hard. But eventually it will recover, but we're already starting to see that now in the form of less people applying for mortgages here. And really the sad part about this is with these increased mortgage rates, it's pushing more and more people into looking at getting an adjustable rate mortgage. And so many people got in trouble with this during the last crash, during the last recession. And I feel bad for people who are looking at doing this right now, because it's just not really that smart, You have to have the perfect exit strategy. You got to know exactly what you're doing with your finances and know how you're going to get out of this loan before the time is up, before your interest rate adjusts. Because if you don't, then you could really be putting yourself in harm's way right now. And I don't even know why you'd be looking at buying if you don't have that plan in place, because you're basically just rolling the dice and gambling with your future, guys. So you have to be careful. If you're looking at taking these adjustable rate loans just to get a lower rate, and that's your only reason, and you have no idea what you're going to do when the time comes to refinance, don't do it. Trust me, just don't do it. It could end up working out in your favor, but it also might not. So it's just not worth the risk. And if you want to know what kind of impact this is going to have, look at places like Redfin right now. These guys were saying early in the year that this is not going to be another housing crash. Everything is going to be okay. It's just going to be more like a correction. Well, now they're changing their tune, and they're saying that these overheated housing markets, in particular, places like Phoenix, Las Vegas, Boise, Idaho, Austin, Texas, Dallas, Texas, Atlanta, places like this that saw a huge uptick in buying activity and home prices in the past couple of years are looking at least a 20% decline right now. So anybody who's been watching my channel for a while knows that my definition of a housing market crash is 20% decrease or more. That's just my opinion, okay? There is no real definition of what a crash is, but I think when you see prices go down 20% inside of a year, basically, that it can be considered a crash. And I realize that in many areas that we just talked about, that still leaves prices higher than they were pre-pandemic, but you also need to realize that that is just right now. That's just 20% decrease in the next few months, over the next 6 months to 12 months. And that does not take into account where home prices are going to be in the next 24 months, the next 2 to 3 years, guys. Because if we look at the 2008 housing crash, it took a good 3 to 4 years for prices to completely hit bottom. And I do think we could be looking at a similar situation right now. I don't see how we can't be, considering these mortgage rates are the highest we've seen, in the last 16 years, essentially. Mortgage applications are plummeting. The prices are still too high in many cases for people to afford it. at these rates, you're gonna see the prices come down. And it's already happening in many places. Even here in Miami Beach, I shared with you guys a week or two ago, you know, the housing market crash has already started here just since June. Okay, that was only a few months ago. Now it's October. The prices are down here 13%. Median home sold prices here are down 13%, down from 510,000 to like 442,000, something like that. So it's happening, guys, and you need to look to see if it's happening in your market. This is easy to do. Just go on Redfin, go to the market insights for your local housing market. Look at where the home prices are closing at. Is it trending up or is it trending down? So you might be surprised at what you find. And there are places that are still holding up very strong right now, particularly in the Northeast. I get people who write me all the time in the comments saying, well, things are still looking pretty strong up here in Connecticut and Massachusetts and New York. You know, prices are still going up. There's still multiple offers. And that is true, guys. It is still happening like that. And there's a chance that these areas may fare very well during this housing crash. So it's not going to be everywhere, or maybe they'll just have a delayed effect. Maybe they won't get the crash right away. Maybe it will happen later on. But we'll find out soon enough. It's so nice to walk down here because I've never actually walked down here before. I rode bicycles down here before, down this road, but I've never actually walked this stretch of it, and it's so peaceful down here, guys. Got one for sale here. For an expensive house like this at $4.7 million, they actually sold it pretty quick. It's already under contract. We don't know how much for, but we'll see how much it's sold for after the sale closes. But you don't always see these expensive houses going under contract that fast, that's for sure. Also, the fact that they just bought it a little over a year ago for $2.7, these guys are going to make $2 million in a year. Now, one terrible financial mistake that so many Americans are making right now, and I actually heard this terrible advice growing up too, guys, and that is people are keeping balances on their credit cards on purpose because there is this huge myth that's been around at least since I was a kid, probably even before that, where if you have a small balance on your credit card and you just pay a little bit of it off every month, that will actually help your credit and give you a higher credit score than if you just pay off the balance every month. And that is completely wrong, guys. And like I said, I was taught this growing up too. I never actually practiced that. I never actually did it, but I heard that as advice when I was growing up. And if you've heard this before, you need to realize this is completely not true. In fact, if you carry enough debt on your credit card, it can actually lower your credit score. So one of the last things you want to be doing right now is holding a balance on your credit card on purpose. I mean, if you're in financial trouble and you actually can't pay it off, that's obviously a different story than somebody who is doing it on purpose just because they're under the impression that this is going to help. If you want to have the best credit score, then the total amount of debt, so let's say you have $100,000 in credit available to you total, okay, that across all your credit cards, and we're talking auto loans, everything. You want to be using 30% of that or less. And once you start going over 30% of the amount of credit available to you, that's when your credit score is going to start taking a serious hit, because the credit reporting agencies look at this as a bad thing, because now it looks like you're starting to overextend yourself and have too much debt for the amount of income that you make. So you need to be careful if you're doing this, especially now that credit card interest rates are going up. You have most credit cards sitting at around 18% interest, and starting next year, guys, you're going to see a lot of these cards go over 20%. So not only is it bad for your credit to do this, it's also bad for your finances because you're paying all this interest unnecessarily. So it's just not smart to do it. Pay off your credit card every single month, especially now with these rising interest rates. There's just a massive amount of construction going on around here. I'm sure you guys have noticed. It seems like every other house is a brand new house they're building here, which makes sense because this is where you got to have the most money to buy any real estate around here. Literally, I'm surrounded by a work zone here. It's nuts. Now, one of the concerns we addressed in a previous video on what would happen to home prices after Hurricane Ian is a lot of people were asking, well, what happens to my mortgage if you know, my house got wiped out or it's uninhabitable, something like that. Well, I have some new information to share with you guys that might be helpful, and that is if your mortgage is owned by Freddie Mac, Fannie Mae, or FHA, then you could be eligible for some temporary relief in the form of a forbearance. So just like we had forbearance plans available during the pandemic, they have forbearance plans available for people who have their mortgages owned by these government agencies. And it's pretty much the same thing like we saw back then. You have a few options, guys. You can pause payments for basically up to a year and make no mortgage payments, and then when the forbearance period is over, essentially you go ahead and either add the missed payments to the back of the loan, and that gets paid off when you sell, or you actually pay more per month in order to catch up on the missed payments. They have stuff like that available to you right now. Now, if you decide to go into forbearance, then you don't have to worry about going into foreclosure while you're in the forbearance. But I'd be more worried about going into foreclosure afterwards if the situation's not resolved, you know, the area is still uninhabitable, or the job that you had there is now gone. That's where the danger comes in. So everybody's gonna have to assess this for yourself to see if it's worth doing this or not. But if you want to check to see if your mortgage is owned by Freddie Mac or Fannie Mae or FHA, I have some links down in the description below that will help you look this up to see if in fact your mortgage is owned by these guys or not. And if it isn't, maybe you could contact your mortgage service company and they can help you with a potential forbearance program as well. And basically this whole area over here that we just walked through, it leads right over here to Mount Sinai Hospital. And this is the view from the hospital, guys. It's funny that they put a hospital on some of the most beautiful waterfront land in all of Miami Beach. Not sure what the reason behind that is, but it's pretty interesting that they use up this huge chunk of property for you know, having a big hospital here when it could just be somewhere inland and have more big waterfront houses. But hey, at least if you're staying in the hospital, you got a beautiful view here. Another thing that we just saw that got announced today is that OPEC, the biggest oil manufacturer in the world, is going to reduce the amount of barrels that they're going to be producing of oil by 2 million barrels a day. So that's going to be a pretty significant reduction, and ultimately it's just going to increase the cost of gasoline or any petroleum-based products, guys. And obviously this is coming at pretty bad timing, considering that gas prices have already gone through the roof. And even though they have been down temporarily, you're going to see it go back up right around election time, just like we've all been talking about. So coincidence or not, I don't know, but it is interesting to just observe these things happening, and you can pretty much guarantee that right around the time you're going to be at the polls, that gas is going to cost a whole lot more than it does right now. So that's the interesting thing about this. So let me know if gas prices and inflation and the increased cost of airline tickets and travel in general, hotel stays, let me know if all this is going to impact your holiday plans or not. I, for one, am staying put this year. I went on a 3-month vacation last year, so I committed to basically just staying in Miami this year, and maybe next year I'll go on another big summer vacation like that. If you enjoyed this video and you found it entertaining, please subscribe to the channel. Check out my next video on the screen right over here, and I'll catch you over in the next one.